This is Group 8's project by Lucille, Clifton, by Leslie, Emma, and Jenkins. Lucille Clifton was born on June 27, 1936, in Depew, New York. She studied at Howard University before transferring to State University of New York College, which is closer to her hometown. She was discovered by Langston Hughes via one of her friends introducing a poem of hers to him. He published her poem because he loved it so much, the poetry of the Negro. And then she became a renowned poet, winning many awards and influencing people through her works. Historical context. During Clifton's life, she endured many different eras. Something that significantly influenced her writing was the racism and segregation that was heavily prevalent until it was legally declared unconstitutional in the late 1960s. Because of this, she mainly wrote about her experience as an African American woman and emphasized the endurance and strength she had growing up and living her life. Through all of her problems with her daily life, she still had that endurance and strength to grow up and live her life and become the poet she was. Literary influences. In her childhood, her literary influences were Edna, St. Vincent Millay, and Emily Dickinson, and later on in her life, she continued to use Dickinson as an influence as she added her wit and personality into her works like Dickinson had. The word choice was more of the chef's thought process of who he really is. He is lost in all the branding his face was used for. You can feel it by reading it that he lost all sense of self. He starts by naming other people who were in the same position as him, used for commercialism for multiple decades and contributing to stereotypes. The line, remembering this and that, can refer to him remembering himself before the ad, his life as a slave where he wasn't the smiling and happy person. His real life where he was trapped, owned by another human being where he was a pet. He ends up by putting himself back on the shelves where he feels like he always was belonged. He ends up by pondering the same question, one he may never have the answer to. Him nor everyone who comes across the product buying it mindlessly, which is a recurring theme with all the other products like Jemima and Ben. This poem is a metaphor to what commercialism belittled him to, erasing his real experiences while quoting a false narrative. Quote, we return to our shelves, our boxes, Ben and Jemima, and me we pose and smile. He is never escaping this bubble he was put into. They never knew his true story, rather the mascot he is in brands for that are still using his face to project racism and stereotypes. Even by the grammar and spelling of the ads, here's an example of what some of these ads say. Quote, the food you never tired of. This contributes to the stereotype that black people don't know how to speak properly. This also goes back to slavery. This reason is even a stereotype is because slaves owners did not allow their slaves to go to school, because in the slaves' owners' eyes they are unworthy of education. The tone of this poem can be perceived as very sorrow. The chef was reflecting on a character he was forced to play in a name that was never truly his. Quote, I lag behind trying to remove my chef's hat. The chef is trying to escape what commercialism made him into, the character that they wanted him to play, erasing his whole identity of who he really was as a person. Quote, I was called Ratus, but no mother ever gave that to her son. This can allude back to the period where slaves were sold and traded. Slaves were never given names by their mothers, rather they were given names by their slave owners, giving the slave owners more power by proving that they were their own property. It completely stripped them from their mother or any idea that they truly had someone. Quote, Ben and Jemima and me, we pose and smile.
In the poem Cream of Wheat, Clifton uses the subject of the Cream of Wheat mascot as a vehicle for exploring how commercialism can dehumanize and subjugate people and ideas. The speaker wonders early in the poem about whatever pictured him/left him personless. That Clifton chose the word what and not who is significant and intentional because it's not a question of who owns Cream of Wheat or who is commissioned to the design of the character Ratus, but rather the force that could take the image of a human being and strip him of all personality. That force is commercialism. Throughout the poem, the speaker questions what his name is and whether he even has a real name at all. This quest for a name is key to the speaker's personality and experience. It should be noted that the speaker is the chef character portrayed on the Cream of Wheat box and not the actual human who portrayed the character. However, the speaker's search for a name conflicts too. When the speaker claims he once read in an old paper that his name is Ratus, he means the man who portrayed him. Perhaps because the mascot himself was never named, he must build an identity around the unknown person in whose image was created. The voice in Cream of Wheat can be described as humble and troubled. The poem was written in first person, present tense, suggesting that the reader is accompanying the speaker on his nightly stroll in search for identity. The speaker talks in both singular, while he is ruminating in plural when he describes himself as part of the group with his companions, Ben and Jemima. Lucille Clifton adopts the voice of Rattus, the cream of wheat mascot. The speaker's voice differs from the poet's voice in that Rattus is male and less educated than the poet, though his diction is not written to be backward or glottable. The poem begins with the speaker describing how sometimes at night he strolls the aisles of the grocery store along his friends. The speaker describes these nightly activities as habitual and refers to his friends by their first names, calling them Ben and Jemima. While the poem never explicitly identifies the speaker as the Cream of Wheat mascot, nor identifies Ben and Jemima as the food mascots Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, between the poem's title and imagery, it is made clear that the principal figures are the Cream of Wheat man, Uncle Ben, and Aunt Jemima. The poem Cream of Wheat is part of a three-poem sequence with the section Hearing that also includes the poem Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. Like Cream of Wheat, these two poems explore the racially charged associations and histories of their subjects. In Aunt Jemima, the speaker is the persona of the African American mascot Aunt Jemima, describing a pancake mix, syrup, and other breakfast products as she represents and voicing her desire to escape from commercialism and have her own syrup, as well as her own kitchen, family, and home. Uncle Ben, meanwhile, describes a story of mother's Jenny slave who knew rice and is enslaved to grow rice for his white masters, drawing a connection between the African American rice mascot Uncle Ben and the slave labor roots of the American industry. And these are our sources and what we used.